recording now. Or at least I hope it is. All right, so welcome everybody to the STAR program, the Summer Training and Research Program. So great to see so many people here today who are getting ready to start some research projects here at UHN. I'm sure you've already been here, what, about a week or so now? I think a lot of people started last week. Yes, I'm seeing some nodding heads, that's great. So I hope everything's been going great so far. And we're here to start the next step in your program, which is some learning sessions and some opportunities to expand some of your research knowledge. So just to introduce myself, I'm the one who's been sending all the emails. My name is Jordan, and I'm the coordinator with the Office of Research Trainees. So it's great to see so many people here today. I think I've said this enough, but again, if you haven't done this yet, please fill out the attendance form. I'll pop it up at the end in case anyone's missed it. So before we start today's session, I'd just like to begin with a land acknowledgement. So I'd like to acknowledge the sacred land on which the University Health Network operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the Mississauga of the Credit River. This territory was the subject, with the Dish with One Spoon, Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and Allied Nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. And yeah, so I just wanted to share as well a really great resource and website that you can go to learn about the Indigenous lands, whether that's here in Toronto or if you're from somewhere else. Really cool to see and explore that resource. Just for an example, I grew up in rural Manitoba, so it was part of Treaty 1. So it was really cool to see the different treaties and all the different information surrounding that and where I grew up. So it's also cool to see where I live now and explore all that as well. So I encourage you all to do that if you have a moment. I also just wanted to highlight another important topic. So just as we're embarking on your research here at UHN, it's encouraged that everyone does review Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. So just some background on this, that these calls of action were presented in 2015 by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and was done after 6 years of research and community engagement on the terrible impacts of the residential school system in Canada. So just as researchers, it is important for us to recognize the harmful ways that Indigenous people have been exploited in research and learn the best practices for including Indigenous people and Indigenous knowledge moving forward. Again, I'll just give it one quick moment to scan this QR code to access some resources. And if you don't feel free, you have to try and get every link down as possible. There's going to be an email that's sent out after, and it'll include all of the links that we share today. So just a few guidelines and tips and then before we move on. So as I've alluded to, so there's the slides, sessions being recorded, as well as all the links will be shared in an email to everyone after the session. It'll just check the inboxes that you've registered. Check the email inboxes of the ones that you used to register with us. And that's how you got your email for today. So keep an eye on those inboxes. We'll be sending emails throughout the summer with all this information, links, forms, and all that stuff that'll help you progress through the program. We want to also encourage everyone's participation. There's a number of different polls and ways to participate throughout the program, but also just feel free to raise your hand and talk out loud. It's always encouraged. It's always great to hear people's voices and everyone interacting. And then at the end, so we'll be in this room together for about an hour and a half, and then for the last half hour between here and then there's the class. We have the classroom next door booked, just for a little meet and greet. You have an opportunity to meet each other, and there'll be some pizza, so you can have a little snack and meet your fellow summer students. And lastly, this is a safe space, so we do ask that everyone remains respectful and review the code of conduct if you have a moment. I also just want to highlight an event that some people here may be interested in. It's just on the topic of the career journeys of UHN biomedical engineers. So if there's anyone interested in that career field or has some engineering background, this might be something of interest to you, just to learn about some cool career path. So it's happening next week on Wednesday. Again, register via that QR code. It'll be sent out. I'll sound like a broken record, but again, I won't. We'll be sending out everything. So just bring that to your attention. All right, so now, what are we going to talk about today? So first, we'll just talk about what the program is and the opportunities available that you'll have through the program. In things helping you getting started in research, helping you align your expectations between you and your mentor, your supervisor, highlighting some different training opportunities. And then I'll pass it over to Pallavi, who's a Princess Margaret postdoc, who will take you through a session on scientific inquiry. So starting from a hypothesis and then taking your hypothesis to an experiment. And lastly, again, meet and greet over pizza. All right, so it's our program. So everyone's here, so you're all aware of it and you all know what's happening. So this program is an opportunity to enhance your research skills and your professional development skills. So this is done through 6 different learning sessions. So there'll be one after day. It'll start June 6th and then run every 2 weeks until August. There'll be some networking opportunities between yourselves. Some graduate students will be here for a panel, as well as some UHN staff members as well to explore different jobs in different areas of research and healthcare. The program will conclude with a research day where you'll be able to talk about the research that you've done or anything that you've learned over the summer. So that'll happen on August the 7th, as well as for your time, there's also a certificate of program completion that'll be available to everyone. And the requirement for that is to attend live or watch a recording and then filling out a form of 4 of the 6 learning sessions and then presenting in research day. So just to reiterate that your in-person participation is encouraged because there's a lot of interactive components that are happening to supplement the workshops, but if you can't make it, that recording option is available. So just a little bit of a highlight of the program and some important dates. So of course you're here today for the first one, and then it's from June 6th, we're going to be talking with the Research Quality Integration team to learn about responsible conduct of research. Then we're going to move on to a workshop on networking, where you'll have an opportunity to do some practice your elevator pitches with each other and just learn some basic tips on networking. Then you can learn from a panel of graduate students, master's and PhD students to learn about what graduate school is like. Then on July 18th, this is where else we'll begin thinking about Research Day. So we'll have an opportunity to learn from graduate students and postdocs how to create great posters and communicate your research through those different mediums. And then that's when you'll also have the opportunity to sign up for Research Day. And then we'll end off the program with a panel of UHN staff members to explore careers in healthcare and science. All right. I know for this next set of slides, I'm going to be throwing a lot of information at you. So again, if there's any questions, please feel free to stop me. But I'll just take this as a breaking point. Does anybody have any questions about the program requirements or anything like that? No, I see some shaking heads. That's cool. Again, I'll be here for after the session. So if you have any questions, you feel free to come up to me after. So I wanted to give everyone also a little bit of an overview of research at UHN. UHN is a big place and there's a lot of research happening here. So just to highlight, the UHN research arm is composed of 6 different research institutes. So just to list them all here, we have KITE, which is with the Toronto Rehab Institute. We have Kremble, which is over at the Toronto Western Hospital, McEwen Stem Cell Institute. We have the Princess Margaret Cancer Center within the Princess Margaret Hospital, which we are in today. We have TIER, which is the Institute of Education Research. And lastly, the Toronto General Hospital Research Institute, which is part of Toronto General Hospital. Since there's so many different, there's a lot of people that also make up UHN. There's over 2,000 trainees and postdocs that make up the research community. And there's, I believe, over 1,000 principal investigators and even more staff members that make up research. So it's a huge place. There's a lot of great people to meet. So again, please utilize that network to meet as many people as you can. We're just going to start off with one quick poll. I'd love to know where everyone's from and where you're doing your research. So we'll also be using Slido a lot during the workshop or the session today. So keep this link, your phone's handy and this link handy. You can either scan the QR code or you can go to slido.com and type in that number and complete the poll. So we have here listed all of the different research institutes, but there's also some people here that may be from other places, like different departments at UHN, like there's like Research Support and Solutions Department that I know there's some summer students that are working at. And if you don't know, that's also okay. Lots of people from Princess Margaret. No one's that is not sure. So that's good. Everyone knows where they're working. Amazing. Great, seems to be kind of plateauing out. So it's welcome. It looks like there's lots of people from all the different institutes, which is great. Nice to see some representation from everyone here. All right, so now we just want to help you get started at UHN. So UHN is, and getting started at UHN can be a bit stressful, and there's a lot of things, different things to do. So there's one thing that our office has put together, and it is a student and postdoc handbook. There is a lot of information here that is relevant to graduate students and postdocs, but there's a lot of information in here that I think would be relevant to everyone here, just to help you navigate the process, navigate some of the onboarding requirements, and all like some of those more administrative tasks that you need to do to get started at UHN. It also lists a number of different research facilities, different supports, wellness supports, research facilities, different career and professional development resources. It's a big document. So I encourage you all to have a look at it and explore what's in there if you have any outstanding questions. Of course, the Office of Research Trainees, that's where I work. As I've mentioned, we do support all trainee postdocs at UHN, so we are here to support anybody at any time in their research career. So if you ever have any questions or if ever have a concern or you need help finding something, come talk to me. There's also another person in our office. Her name is Amanda. She wasn't able to be here today, and she's the manager of the ORT. So again, if you can come chat with me after today's session, or you can send us an email at any point at our email listed on the screen, ortadmin@uhn.ca. Welcome to everyone who's coming on in. Have a seat anywhere you'd like. We also have an appointment system where you can meet one-on-one with us. You'll be meeting with me if you make an appointment. So again, another mode outside of emailing or coming to talk to me after this is you can book a quick appointment and we can talk about whatever issues or comments that you have. Now, so at this point, I'm going to assume everyone has been fully onboarded at UHN. So now it's time to get started in research. So it's important that we start mastering the basics before you really dive really deep into your research. So there's a number of different things that's important for you all to learn and think about as you're getting started. So things like understanding and learning about the field that you're working in, learning about all the theory and learning about theory, techniques, background information, anything that you think would be relevant to help you build that foundation to understand the research when you're doing it either in the lab or on the bench or in a clinic or whatever setting that your research is happening in. It's really important for you to understand that background of your project because it'll really help you develop those questions, think critically, and help you succeed throughout your research time. It's really important to understand as well why you're doing the research. What are the things that were done before to get to the question that you're helping solve. So all that information is really important, and there's ways to figure that out. Both asking tons and tons of questions to your mentor, your supervisor. They have a lot of the knowledge, and they're the ones who have been doing the work before you've joined. So they're great resources and great people to tap into. So please don't ever be shy to talk to any of them. Review papers are also another really great source of information. They really summarize to the field and that question or that topic up to the date of publication. So that's another great place to really read and about the topic that you're in. Welcome everybody, just have a seat anywhere you'd like. And as I said, learning the theory behind the methods, techniques, and all of that stuff, especially if you may be learning a lot of these topics in your classes, perhaps in some of your undergrad classes. So it's really fun, I found, to take all those theories and techniques and actually putting them into practice. It really helps you understand those concepts a lot better as well. So again, ask questions, be curious, and explore. Other thing is safety is really important. There's sometimes you could be working with, especially in lab research settings, you could be working with maybe some nasty chemicals or some things that pose hazards. So just for your safety, it's really important that you understand the hazards that you'll be interacting with, and to making sure that you're following the correct protocols to ensure your safety of yourself and of your lab members. Just a quick reminder on that. Again, just reiterating, always talking with your supervisor and coworkers and for suggestions. Everyone's thinking a little bit differently, so everyone has great ideas. So always having those conversations, asking questions, and yeah. Is also anybody finding it a little hot in here? I'm very warm. Okay, it's not just me. Okay. Great. I just wanted to also, I'll turn the lights down too, maybe that'll help cool us off a little bit. So to help you find a lot of these papers and resources, I just wanted to share a few different things that might be relevant to you, and it's some great information to know. So first is the UHN libraries. Like many of your universities, it's a large database of different articles and information to help you do your research. So this is your go-to place at UHN for accessing journal articles. As well, the UHN libraries also has a number of different workshops and recordings. If there's any confusion on how to search for your papers in PubMed, so a paper database, also searching Medline and other different database, as well as when you're doing a lot of writing, you obviously need to cite. So there's different things called citation managers like Mendeley and EndNote, which are great resources to use. So another thing that they teach you is how to use those effectively, as well as teaching you how to write different kinds of reviews. So perhaps you may be involved with some different writing or in reading papers that are in progress. So again, some great resources here for you to help to get started there. Many of you, there may be some people in the room that are working on clinical research projects, and there is something called the Clinical Research Hub, and it's a really great website. It's on UHN SharePoint page. So you need to sign in with your UHN email address and password, and it provides this page provides a nice overview of the study's life cycle and resources at every step of a clinical research project. They have different learnings on topics like recruitment of patients, informed consent, research integrity, research ethics, risk. It's a great resource, and it has different policies and templates for different documents that you may be having to use in those research projects. As well, there's something called research quality integration. Their team is involved with the responsible conduct of research. We'll be hearing from them, as I mentioned, on June 6th, so you can all learn about conducting research with integrity and responsibly. Their website has guidelines for researcher responsibilities, integral policies, and different ways and processes to respond to misconduct. They also, if there's ever concerns about anything, they do provide consultations on research integrity concerns, and also perhaps like authorship disputes or anything like that. So that they're another resource to go to for that. And also research ethics. There may be some people in the room that are working on projects that are approved by the Research Ethics Board. So it's important for those people in the room to understand this process and protocols that surround REB approved projects. So their website and UHN also has trainings available through My Learning for good clinical research practice, clinical research ethics, how to ask for informed consent, and much more. So again, relevant to those who are doing REB approved projects. And it's also important to learn about the research ethics standards and guidelines. So all just some housekeeping notes and some important things to consider moving forward. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I shared with you just a number of different resources and tips kind of getting started. Before I continue, again, I know I'm throwing a lot of information. If there's any questions, please feel free to raise your hand. I'm always just want to reiterate that just to make sure that everyone feels comfortable doing so. Seeing no hands, again, always opportunities later on. So the next part I just wanted to touch on is just setting goals and aligning your expectations. It's really important for the success in your research to understand why you're doing it and what's expected of you, but also aligning what you're hoping to get out of it with that of your mentor and your supervisor. So aligning expectations between you and your supervisor can really ensure great communication. Communication is key when working with teams, of course, and it also helps increase your productivity in your project. So these are just some things that you want to keep in mind, and maybe some conversations that I'd be willing to have as you're starting your projects. So think about things like, what are the hours that you're expected to work? Where are you expected to work? Can you do some work at home? Are there some systems or programs that you can only access on site? What meetings are you expected to attend? Many labs and many groups have lab meetings or different project-specific meetings, journal clubs. Are you expected to attend all of them? Are you expected to attend only some of them? Those are all some things that are really important to know. What's the best mode of communication? Email. Are there different instant messaging platforms like Slack or Teams? What's the best place to contact somebody, whether it's in case of an emergency or just general communications and questions? Another great thing to know. How often will you meet or check in? It's another great thing. It's always great to have project updates, get for feedback, for questions, and it's always great to set regular times for that. I know like if you're working on teams, everyone else also has their projects. So it's really great to have setting aside some time so you can sit down and have all those questions answered and help move your project forward. Also, preparing for meetings is also important. So what is expected of you when you come into a meeting? Are you expected to present? Are you expected to whatever that could look like? So just understanding what are the expectations of you coming into a meeting as well. Data management is really important. So sometimes you could be storing, where do you store the data? So are you storing it on a server? Some even places use in the research lab that I worked on is a little bit old school, but we were storing some data we were burning stuff onto CDs. Seemed a bit old, but like depending on if there's connectivity concerns or anything like that. So ensuring that you're storing the data in a proper way. And then also just thinking about the timelines for different tasks. You're all of course learning and you're all early stages of your research. So just understanding how much time it could take you to do something and what's expected in that way as well. So a lot of different things to consider and I encourage you all to have some of those conversations if that hasn't happened already. And then just thinking about your goals. What are the goals? What are their goals for you as your mentor? What are your goals? What are you hoping to get out of your summer program? That's also some things that is really important to consider. Are there specific skills that you're hoping to learn, or is there something that you're not super interested in, but there's something else that you think would be pretty cool? Think about all those things as well. Just to again highlight, understanding your mentor's expectations and priorities can really help you plan for your summer and really help you get the most out of your summer experience. Okay, last section before I pass it over to Pallavi. Just wanting to highlight some different training opportunities and some different career exploration opportunities that we have. So there is something that the Cancer 360 program is open actually to all summer students at UHN. It's not exclusively open to just Princess Margaret students. There is an arm of it, like there is some components that are open to only Princess Margaret students, but this program in general is open to everyone. It's a really great program, and it's a self-guided program. So it's an e-learning module that gives you a 360-degree view of cancer. So every week there'll be Thursday lunchtime Q&A sessions with different experts within different subfields of cancer, and there'll be additional Q&A sessions in person with pizza for those who are part of Princess Margaret. So another great program I encourage you all to take part in. So this program does run from June to August of every year, but you can sign up right now. You just need to create an account on a website called PM Cancer Campus. You scroll down and you look for Cancer 360 Plus Summer Student Program, and then you enroll using the code SUMMER 2025. I'll share this all again after the session. So beyond this session and this program, the ORT does offer a number of different workshops and events and training opportunities for your research skills as well as your professional development. We do host a ton of different career panels. You can explore different areas of careers like in industry, government, academia. So that's just one of the sets of works that we do. We have also a small video library with recordings of past events. You've been receiving our emails, but we do send weekly emails, and it lists a number of different training opportunities that are within UHN as well as outside, as well as a number of different funding opportunities. We also have a funding database. There's a database that many of you may have access to already to find summer student positions, but there's also a database with different funding opportunities to support salaries and those types and conferences and those types of things. So something that you may be interested in at some point if anyone becomes a graduate student, postdoc in the future. And then just also like to highlight, once you leave UHN, a lot of these workshops and events are still open to you. So you can still keep taking part in those opportunities because many of those are open to the public as well. One other really cool thing and really great opportunity that you have access to at UHN is something called Percipio. So Percipio is a virtual learning platform, and it has I don't even know how many, it has so many, like probably thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands of different videos and self-paced training opportunities that can help advance your skills and professional development in so many different topics like leadership, management, inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, data literacy, business, technology, communication skills. That list can go on and on and on. The really great thing, it's free to anybody who's here at UHN. And there's also a number of different courses built in that can help you get professional certificates, like a project management certificate, as well as certificates for Microsoft Office. It's a really great platform. I encourage you all to explore. I also encourage you all to take full advantage of any opportunities to learn within UHN. A number of your different departments and institutes have journal clubs, scientific seminars, as well as different events hosted by us and UHN and widely as well. So I do encourage you to take part in that. As well, there is a group called UHN STEM Pathways, which is a youth outreach group. They have a number of different volunteer opportunities, so you can also check them out if you're if you are interested in volunteering some of your time as well. All right, so we're just gonna so in the middle and at the end of the session, we're just gonna do a quick temperature check just to see if you're finding any of this information helpful. So if you, again, we can go back to Slido and you can please fill out this quick poll. It's all anonymous, so feel free to input whatever you'd like. We'll just give this a couple of seconds and then we will pass it over to Flavie. Your phones are still up, going down. Are you okay to move on? I think not. Still see a few people on their phones. Cool. I'm gonna end it. Right. Over to you, Flavie.
Hey, thank you, Jordan. That was a great intro session. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pallavi Mathur. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Princess Margaret Cancer Center. And in this session today, I'm going to cover some really basic general points on how to think like a scientist. So we're going to talk about scientific inquiry. We'll cover topics about forming a research hypothesis all the way to conducting an experiment and then troubleshooting it. So on the agenda today, we'll start with an introduction to scientific inquiry. We'll discuss what it really means and why is it important. We will then move on to formulating a research question. What are the characteristics of a good research question? After which we will see how do we go from a research question to a research hypothesis and design experiments to answer your hypothesis. We'll also talk about some common experimental errors and how do you troubleshoot and refine your experiments, and some final takes away from the sessions. And within this session, we'll also have some mini activities going on around. So it's going to be at Slido. So you will have to use your phones to scan the QR code and answer the question. So let's begin. So what is scientific inquiry? So scientific inquiry is not just about conducting experiments. It's basically a systematic, critical way of thinking about your research question and to develop evidence-based research. Now, you start with asking a question which is relevant to your topic. From that question, you form a hypothesis, test that hypothesis with experiments, analyze it, and then refine an experiment. So it's not a linear process, it's more iterative. You have to go back and rethink and refine your hypothesis to move forward in your research question. And this is the foundation of scientific knowledge. So of course, we want to contribute towards science. Now, why does it really matter? Why does it matter to have scientific inquiry? So scientific inquiry drives innovation and discovery. So it helps you enable critical thinking. And by critical thinking, you generate evidence-based research. And these evidences are, it's the platform for future research to develop. And like I said, you're contributing towards science. So it's how you contribute towards scientific development. Now, the first thing, or starting your research, you need a good research question. So what are the qualities of a good research? So there's a very handy mnemonic that you can that you have here, which is called Finder Maps. which defines what a good research question is, the qualities of it. So a good research question should be feasible. So by feasibility, it means that you should be able to conduct that research within the resources and times that you have at hand. It should be interesting, of course, to yourself, but also to the scientific community. So it should be contributing something to the scientific knowledge. It should be novel, very important. You should have a question which is going to fill the gaps in the literature, something that's not known. It should be, of course, parallel with ethical statements of your research. It should be relevant to the scientific community. It should be manageable. This is in line with the feasibility that you should be able to do that research within the time frame and resources, and also the expertise that you have at hand. It should be appropriate in terms of health practices, clinical practices. It should have a potential value, which essentially means that there should be publishability. So you should be able to publish it at the end. And also contribute towards, if it's a clinical research, then clinical development. And it should be systematic. So your research question should be something that can be carried out in a systematic, structured manner. So if you follow these finer maps, this mnemonic, and if your research question fits these criteria, then it means that you have a very structured starting point for research. Now, once you have a good research question, how do you go from that to forming a hypothesis? Now, research question is essentially an open-ended question, which is broader, and it explores a phenomena which may or may not be directly testable, but it's your starting point of research. But then you move on from your research question to your hypothesis, which is basically a declarative statement. So you're making prediction about what your research will give, what's the output is going to be. And it's a tentative answer to your research question that is not yet tested, but it's something that can be tested by experiments. So that's a statement. And this is the basis of designing experiments and conducting analysis. So let's look at the steps of forming a research hypothesis. So how do you go about it? So like I said, you start with a good research question that you want to answer. And to do that, you do some preliminary research. You look for theories in previous studies or basically the data that exists in the lab. And based on this, once you have a research question, you identify variables within that research question. Now, there are two variables that we're going to be talking about throughout this session. One is the independent variable. So independent variable essentially means it's a variable that you change or manipulate. It's something that you will modify during your experiments, and the dependent variable is what you will measure. So these are two things that you're going to have to keep in mind for forming experiments later on. And now once you have your variables identified, you make a hypothesis, which is a prediction, and there are two statements that you generate. So one is the null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Now, null hypothesis essentially means that there would be no effect when you change your independent variable. And the alternative hypothesis means that you will have an expected effect. So you're predicting the outcome. And then following which you can use if and then statements to include your identified variable. So let's look at an example to see how that works. So for instance, here's a research question. So in this example, we're looking if a short-term exposure to antibiotics would reduce the diversity of gut microbiota in mice. So now we have a very open-ended research question, but this is not a basis of directly doing an experiment. So for that, we'll first identify what are the variables in this research question. So independent variable, as we know, is a variable that we're going to change. So we want to test the effect of antibiotic on the gut microbiota. So our antibiotic is basically an independent variable in this research question. So how do you change it? Either by giving the antibiotic or not, dose or duration. And the dependent variable is something that's our readout. What are we measuring or what are we monitoring in this research question? So that's the gut microbiota diversity. So now you have your two dependent and independent variables. And once you have that, it's very easy to form your hypothesis, which is the basis of your experiment. So you have the null hypothesis, which says that the antibiotic exposure will not affect the gut microbiota diversity. And your alternative hypothesis is that antibiotic exposure will reduce the gut microbiota diversity. So now you have your statements, which are going to be the basis of your experiment from your research question. And furthermore, to make this statement more specific, you could use if and then statement. So over here, you can say that if mice are exposed to antibiotics for 7 days, so basically your independent variable, then their gut microbiota diversity, which is the dependent variable, will be reduced compared to untreated control. So now you have a statement on which you can generate or design your experiment. So you start from a research question, and now you have a hypothesis for testing it. So to sum up, characteristic of a good hypothesis is that it's testable and falsifiable. It's very clear, it's specific, and it's based on prior knowledge. So you read the literature and you build your hypothesis and research question on that. All right, so now let's do a mini activity based on what we learned in the last few slides. So I'm going to read this scenario. It's a very basic scenario of an observation. And from this scenario, we will together try to figure out what could be a research question, what are we trying to find out. We'll identify the variables in the situation, and then we'll propose a testable hypothesis, which includes both a null and an alternative hypothesis. So you're going to need your phones to scan the QR code and answer the question later on. So let's first look at the scenario that we're thinking of. So a student notices that plants in their house seem to thrive in rooms where classical music is frequently played. Curious about this observation, the student wants to investigate whether classical music has any effect on plant growth. The student then decides to design an experiment to explore this further using potted houseplants and controlled conditions over a period of 2 weeks. So now this is our research scenario. Let's move on to the first question. So now, based on the scenario that we just read, what do you think among the three is the best research question? So it's an open-ended question, which will be basis of what we want to study from that research scenario. So please take a few moments to answer this question using the QR code. Right. Very good. Yeah. So very simple. Does classical music affect the growth rate? So that's what we're interested to find out. We don't want to know if plants enjoy music. We don't want to know if plants hear sounds. So from that research scenario. So very nice. Now that we have a research question, which of the following, oh, yes, we have, this is the answer. Let's move on. So now from that research question, let's try to identify our variables. So we're going to look for two variables, independent variable and dependent variable. So independent variable is going to be something that you would change during your experiment. Dependent variable is going to be your readout. What are you measuring? So again, please use the QR code and let's find out what's the independent variable first.
Should be the same QR code and the link for each of the different polls. So if you keep it open, it'll keep automatically popping them up on your screen as well.
All right, yes, very simple. So we're changing just the music exposure. We're not going to modify the type of plant. We're not going to change the growth rate of, that's something that we want to measure. So our changeable variable is going to be the music exposure. And let's do the same for the dependent variable. So very simple, what are we going to measure? All right, I see everyone's already answered it. Okay, great. So we're measuring the growth rate of plants. So very simple example, it tells us that now you have a research question from a scenario and you've built you've figured out what the dependent and independent variables are going to be. Okay, so that's the right answers. Now, let's form a hypothesis. So like I mentioned, we need a null hypothesis and an alternative hypothesis that either you have an effect versus you don't. So among the three options, please select the one that you think is the best null and alternative hypothesis combination. So again, use the Slido for this. All right. Yeah, so very simple. we're testing the effect of classical music on plant growth. So we say that the null hypothesis is that it has no effect, and your testable alternative hypothesis would be that it supports plant growth. So very good. No doubts. Everyone was very clear about it. Right. So now we've learned how do you go form a research question, but what are your sources? Like, how do you get this research question if you're just starting your research? So this could be pilot experiments in the lab. So in the teams that you've joined, maybe they have some initial experiments, which is your research scenario. And from that, you could build your research question and hypothesis. It could be literature gaps in the field or topic of your research. You read the review papers, you read the literature, and you see that there are few connections which are missing. So that could be the source. It could be anomalous data, which means that the data that doesn't make sense or it's contradictory to the known literature, that's the basis of your starting for the research question. Or it could be an interdisciplinary idea. Between the two disciplines, you want to collaborate, and based on that collaboration, you could have a research question. So let's move from thought to experiment. Now that we have a research hypothesis on hand, how do you go about starting an experiment? Now, there are 4 considerations before you begin any experiments, which are very crucial. One is the experimental design, experimental groups, sample size, and then finally planning the measurements and method. Now, since everyone's going to be working in different fields, so the specifications could be different, but these are the bullet points that you should keep in mind before you start doing an experiment to avoid redoing it and when things don't work out well. So let's look at the experimental design. We've already discussed the independent variable and dependent variable, so we already know about these. But there's another thing that you should keep in mind, which is the controlled variables. Now, these are the factors that you're going to keep constant to avoid any confounding effects, which means that when your experiments don't work out, you should be sure that you've kept everything else same and just change that one independent variable to say that the effect you see is because of that and not of anything else. Once you have your control and independent dependent variables ready, now you think of experimental groups. Experimental groups would include a control group, which will not receive your independent variable, and an experimental group where you will, which will receive the independent variable on one or more levels. So you have these 2 groups ready. Now it's important to also have a sample size consideration, which means that how many, if you're working with mice or if you're working even with cell lines, how many samples or replicates are you going to need for this? So sample size is a very important consideration because it's going to help you ensure statistical power and reliability. So there are several tools that help you determine the sample size, but usually in life sciences research, you could also, you have to repeat experiments and then figure out what is the basic starting point of replicates. For example, you should have triplicates of your technical controls. Or for mice, maybe a good starting point could be 4 or 5 mice. So this is an important consideration that you must keep in mind when you're designing your experiment. And then comes the measurement methods. So what will you measure, which is basically your dependent variable that you're going to monitor. But how will you measure it? So there are multiple assays of answering the same question. So you look at the resources at hand, what's used in the lab, and then you start with the basic experiment. And you also keep in mind the time of data collection. So you don't want to miss your observation, neither do you want to waste resources by doing the experiment for a very long time. So the time of data collection is also a very important consideration. So now let's go back to the example of the antibiotic. So we were testing whether short-term antibiotic exposure reduces gut microbiota diversity in mice. Let's see if we can build an experiment around this. So in this example, we already we figured out that our independent variable, the one that's going to be changing, is antibiotic dose. And the dependent variable is the gut microbe activity, or the gut microbiota, basically. Now, what would be the things that you would want to keep controlled without changing? So in this example, we don't want to change the mouse strain. We don't want to change the type of mouse. We don't want to change the age and sex of the mice or the diet that's given. So these are the factors on which your mice are functioning. So you don't want to change them, but you just want to change the antibiotic dose or time that's given to them. So you have your control variables, independent variable, and dependent variable. Now let's talk about control groups. So control group is going to be the set of mice which do not receive the treatment. And the experimental group is going to be the ones which will get the antibiotic treatments. Sample size considerations. So like I said, for the mice experiment, we're going to start with 4 to 6, let's say, mice per group of control and experiment. And then method of measurement, measuring the gut microbiota can be various. We can collect DNA and identify or analyze the microbiota composition. And then the duration is probably going to be before or after the treatment. So now you have the basis of this experiment, and this is a good starting point for you to actually do the experiment. So what are the importance of controls? So we've discussed about formulating an experiment, but it's very important to keep in mind that there are several controls which will tell you whether your experiment works, whether the observations you have is a real observation, or is it because of some changes that you made or things that you didn't keep controlled. So the 3 controls that you'd always have in mind, one is a positive control. A positive control is basically, for instance, in that antibiotic example, it's an antibiotic which has a known effect on gut microbiota. So that's your positive control, which is with a known effect already. A negative control is something that we know will not show an effect. So for instance, if it's the gut microbiota, it's an antibiotic that we know will not affect the gut microbiota. And then there are internal standards. So internal standards are important in many experiments. These are basically a positive control, another analyte, which is calibrated across different doses. So this is your reference point to tell you that your experiment has worked, your reagents are fine. So once you have all of these controls, you have a handle over your experiment, and any observation that you have from it, it will be easy to figure out what went wrong. So we were talking about data collection. So as I said, the assays that you do are going to be different for different research topics. So you need to figure out what is the readout of your experiment. So whatever techniques you're using, try to find out what are the readout options available in the lab before you start the experiments. Think of the measurement frequency. How frequently do you need the data collection to be performed so that you have a good data with statistical significance? And to answer all of these questions, you do pilot experiments. So your pilot experiments are initially experiments which will help you determine the measurement frequency, the doses which needs to be given. So you start with pilot experiments. Once you have standardized condition and optimized experiment, you perform the real experiment. So now we have learned how to go from research question, form a hypothesis, and then conduct experiments. But what happens when experiments don't work? Because that's the reality of research. Things don't always work out. But it's very important to be resilient and keep trying. So let's take a look at very common errors that happen during the experiments. So one can be that there's no observed effect. So you did the experiment, but you didn't see any effect of what you were expecting. What do you do in that case? So that's why we had a control. So we're going to see if the controls worked or not. So if the controls have worked, that's telling us that the reagents are fine, the machine is fine, our protocol is okay. Something that if it doesn't work, that's a real observation, that there's no effect. So you test your reagents, you test with the known sample, and then you check if the controls are not working, you check maybe your equipment or your protocol. If you have inconsistent replicates, which means that you see an observed effect in few of your samples, but not all of them. So what does that mean? So maybe you need to review your protocols. Maybe some of the steps went wrong for those particular replicates, or you think of the variables that you haven't controlled. So like I said, you have some controlled variables, for instance, the mice strain, mice age in that example. And maybe all the mice were not at the same age, or they weren't given similar food. So your control variables were not really controlled. So maybe that's why you have inconsistent replicates. If you have very high variability, which means that you need to standardize your technique, or you need to reconsider the sample size. Maybe you have too few sample points, which is why you see such high variation in your data. So these are some basic things that you think of, and it's very important to consult literature. So look up what people have done, what kind of experiments they have done, and the troubleshooting. Talk to your colleagues. They're going to be helpful. They have more experience. They'll help you out how to conduct this particular experiment. And if everything doesn't work out, that probably means that you haven't asked the right questions. So you maybe want to go back to your research question and form a better research hypothesis. So in bullet points, how do you refine your experiments? You improve your hypothesis, then you modify your parameters of the experiment. You use a better new tools or new assays to answer that question. And like I said, it's an iterative process. So you rethink and refine and then retest. Very important to keep at it. All right, so let's go back to the example of the plant growth in classical music. And let's see if we can now perform an experiment to monitor that growth together. So previously, we did come up with this research question. We said that does classical music affect the growth rate of houseplants? We had our hypothesis, classical music has no effect, or classical music supports plant growth. And we know that our variables are music exposure, and dependent variable, what we measure is the growth rate or height of the plants. Now let's talk about experimental design to answer that hypothesis. Now, which of these do you think should be kept constant, which is your controlled variable in this experiment? And you can select more than one option here. So let's go to the Slido and start answering the question. So what variables do you think we should keep constant here? All right, yeah, very good. We are gonna keep, okay, let's go to the answer. So we're gonna keep the plant species constant. We don't wanna change that. Watering schedule needs to be constant. They should be under the same conditions. Amount of sunlight should be constant. So all of these are controlled variables. And of course, type of music is what is our identified independent variable. So we're gonna change that. Let's now talk about the experimental setup. So which among these do you think is the best experimental setup? So now we're talking about control groups and test groups. And let's answer this question on Slido. All right, yes, very good. So we need 10 plants exposed to classical music, similar number of plants in silence, in control conditions. And of course, it can't work with one plant each, neither can it work if you change the genre of music. We're talking about classical music. Right. All right, and now finally, we've performed the experiment. We monitored the growth of plants in this condition, and now we see inconsistent results. So out of our 10 plants, some of them respond to classical music, they grow well, some of them don't. So let's think about troubleshooting this issue. So this is an issue of inconsistent results. So what do you think out of these options is the best example of troubleshooting? Like, how do you go about the troubleshooting? Okay. Yes, everyone's very clear about it. So we check for uncontrolled variables, for instance, about unequal light exposure. Maybe there was unequal distance from the speaker. That's why you see this inconsistency. Maybe the watering schedule was different. And of course, we're not going to conclude that music has no effect. That's too fast, too quick, and not right. And we're not going to assume that it's effective on only some plants without really testing that hypothesis. Yeah. All right, so what are the key takes away from this? You need to have a strong hypothesis to have an impactful research. So always make sure that you're asking the right question. Thoughtful design seems a lot of time. So your experiments, like I mentioned, the 4 points, think about it and design experiment that will save you a lot of time and trouble. And it's also going to be very helpful when experiments don't work out. Troubleshooting is essential, and of course, it's very, very crucial to stay curious, stay resilient, because it's an iterative process. You cannot figure it out at one go. So keep at it, keep trying. And yeah, thank you so much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer. And as Jordan mentioned, these slides are going to be shared with you. So there's some useful resources on it, which are going to be very helpful while you start your research journey. Thank you. Are there any questions?